battles won and lost determined possession in history. The Second World War was conflict on an unprecedented scale. Its battles set new marks for the sheer size of forces deployed and for the power of their weapons. In this episode, we include the story of the first battle at sea, in which enemy ships never sighted each other. And we start with the largest army ever to march, when Germany launched its invasion of the Soviet Union. It is one of the questions that puzzles people about the Second World War. Why did Hitler attack the Soviet Union? But the answer is fairly obvious. Because he thought he could win.
This was not just some war for him, this was the war for him. He said that the enslavement of Slavic population, this Lebensraum im Osten, living space in the East, is crucial for the German nation because we do not have any resources.
He is aware that he is in a long war with the Western Allies. There's no real view to how that can be concluded. And then at the same time, if you're Hitler, you're looking at your great ideological enemy in the East, Bolshevism. So he thinks if I bring this forward and if I can destroy them in a short, sharp operation, I eliminate my last ideological rival in Europe, and I am able to access all of the raw materials I need to go on fighting this conceived of global war.
As Hitler said, this is a colossus on clay feet. We will just have to kick in the door and the whole building falls down. Well, that never happened.
The German assault on Russia, by every measure, was an astonishing success, until it stalled. From June 1941 until it was gripped by the Russian winter, the German offensive, Operation Barbarossa, was a long and victorious forward surge.
It's 1919, and though the fighting between the great powers has been promptly socially cut, but there was no de-escalation possible anymore. Now the siege soon came to an end, and some 200 to 300 Spartacists, including around 20 women, in 1920.
Stalin, Philly, rise anything of the century, he would rise from humble beginnings to become the leader of the Soviet Union, one of the world's largest superpowers, being unafraid to sacrifice anything or anyone to achieve power. His political opponents would be shot, his own citizens would be hunted down by the secret police, and millions would be sentenced to back-breaking work in the Gulag labor camps. This is the story of Joseph Stalin. Yosef Jugashvili, later to be known as Joseph Stalin, was born on December 6, 1878, in the small Georgian town of Gori, on the outskirts of the Russian.
On the 26th of November 1941, a Japanese attack fleet consisting of 6 aircraft carriers, 2 battleships and hundreds of aircraft departed from Japan and began the long journey to an assembly point.
The power of a uniform lies in its silence. The power of a uniform lies in its silence. So I made a video a few months back ranking the world's best looking uniforms. Now, of course, my beloved Marine Corps ended up on top, but I couldn't help but notice in the comments a number of people brought up, what about the SS uniforms? What about Nazi uniforms? Now, as a bit of a World War II history buff and a guy here on YouTube that talks about men's style, I thought, who better to answer the question? Why were the Nazis so stylish? Seriously, the SS uniforms haven't been worn for coming in on 80 years, yet people still talk about them as the most stylish uniforms ever made. So why are the SS uniforms so iconic? Find out, gents, in today's video. So to understand why the German uniforms, specifically the SS uniforms of World War II, are so iconic, we need to go back and look at the unification of Germany in 1871. Otto von Bismarck basically unified the German states to defeat the French, and in 1871 unified all of these different states that spoke a similar language but had very different looking militaries, very different customs into one country, Germany. Now, for the next 40 years, German uniforms were all over the place in terms of makeup, color, the way that they were put together. Pretty much the only common thing we saw in a lot of these uniforms was the famous pickle helmet, with the spike on top. That right there was pretty much the standard until 1910. What happened? All of a sudden, we saw a standard going towards practicality worn by an entire nation. By 1915, we're a year into World War I, and all of a sudden, all those flamboyant uniforms, all those colors, all that's gone out the window for practicality.
This episode of The Great War 1919 is sponsored by Battlefront Miniatures, the creators of Flames of War, and their new miniatures war game, The Great War. Supported by a complete range of miniatures and terrain, including trenches, tanks, and guns, The Great War provides a full selection of models suitable for wargaming, collecting, or mass use of artillery, a grinding strategic stalemate, the first use of combat aircraft, and naval operations in the Dardanelles. I'm not talking about the First World War, but a war just before it that marked a major turning point in European geopolitics and in the history of warfare. It destabilized the Balkans and moved the great powers of Europe further down the road of rivalry, distrust, and militarization. It's the Italo-Turkish War of 1911-1912. Chaos and violence of the collapse of the Russian and Austro-Hungarian empires at the end of World War I, new states are being born and armies are on the march. Kiev is at the center of the tragedy as armies of Ukrainian and Polish nationalists, Bolshevik revolutionaries, and White Russian counter-revolutionaries struggle for control of the territory of modern Ukraine. This episode of The Great War is sponsored by CuriosityStream. So go to curiositystream.com/thegreatwar for a special offer. But first, it's July 1921, and in Germany, the small National Socialist German Workers' Party meets to select a new Führer, and his name is Adolf Hitler. Hi, I'm Jesse Alexander. Closest confidants and admirers describe the party's new strategy. Over half of all party members are manual workers, which is a far higher share than in all other non-Marxist parties. Germany's future primarily depends on whether we can return the worker to the national ideal. In this regard, I see the most success in this movement. That is why I fight among their ranks. One important tool in winning over German workers to the tiny party was the acquisition of a newspaper. The problem was the party had attracted relatively few wealthy donors and was constantly short of cash. In December 1920, Eckart used his own funds to top up party fundraising. And the Nazi Party bought the Völkische Beobachter
Welcome to another edition of Fun Facts and History. Today, we will be discussing the Cold War. The aftermath of World War II shifted the global balance of power and created a bipolar world led by
Military power might vary wildly across the globe. Here are
It's March 1922, and in China, tensions are building between the two most powerful warlords in the country. The resulting war will be just one of many in a swirling kaleidoscope of shifting alliances, betrayal, and battle. The chaos culminates in 1928 as Chiang Kai-shek leads the Northern Expedition to crush the Manchurian warlords once.
Karena jatah